Okay, let's talk about Brad Pitt. I mean, the name itself is basically a Hollywood institution, right? For more than 30 years, he's been the global superstar, the icon. But behind that myth, there's a man. And the story of how he's managed his career triumphs alongside some pretty crushing personal lows, well, it's way more complicated than the polished image we see on screen.
And just to understand the myth, you have to get the sheer scale of his success. His movies have pulled in nearly $5 billion across the globe. That's not just successful, that's a number that makes him one of the most bankable, most reliable stars on the entire planet.
You know, it's that kind of consistency that leads public relations experts to basically one conclusion. His public image is practically bulletproof. He has so carefully built a reputation that can just withstand scandals that would have completely buried other careers.
And that, right there, is the big question we're digging into. How does a bulletproof icon handle being brought to his knees? We're going to look at that really difficult and often hidden balance between the perfect public persona and the real man facing some huge private struggles.
So, to really get this whole dynamic, first we need to understand the icon he built. This is the Brad Pitt everyone thinks they know, the one created by decades of just unbelievable success.
And make no mistake, his star power is not a thing of the past. It is happening right now. At 61 years old, his film F1 quickly out-earned other major blockbusters, proving he is still a massive, undeniable box office draw.
This kind of staying power is built on an incredibly solid foundation. We're talking over 30 years and 60 films. He's won Oscars for both acting and producing. He's managed to build a filmography that has everything from cult classics like Fight Club to massive blockbusters like the Ocean's trilogy. So what's the result of managing a career so carefully for so long? It's a deep, deep well of public goodwill. It means that even when personal stuff hits the fan, the public has, for the most part, been willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. That's a kind of trust he's earned through decades of high-quality work.
But that goodwill, that whole bulletproof image, was about to be tested like never before. A series of public and private crises threatened to completely shatter the persona he'd so carefully built.
It really comes down to two major crises that unfolded over several years, both of which would challenge his public image. One was tied to his celebrated charity work in New Orleans, and the other came from the very public, very messy collapse of his marriage.
So, the Make It Right Foundation. It was supposed to be this huge symbol of hope, right? Promising affordable, sustainable homes for victims in the lower Ninth Ward. But the reality was a catastrophe. The homes were just plagued with mold and serious structural problems, leaving a lot of residents stuck in houses they couldn't live in, all while still paying their mortgages. At the same time, his personal life just imploded. His split from Angelina Jolie followed a 2016 plane incident where she alleged in legal filings that he had been physically abusive towards her and their kids, incredibly serious claims that Pitt has consistently and publicly denied.
So, with his charity work in shambles and his family life under this harsh public microscope, how did the man behind the icon actually respond? What happens when the myth starts to crack?
And here's the critical disconnect. To the rest of the world, he was still the global movie star, the iconic leading man. But behind the scenes, his reality was something else entirely. In his own words, he had completely hit rock bottom. He described a time where he was on his knees, just desperate for a change, admitting he needed rebooting.
So shortly after separating from Jolie, he turned to Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was there, he says, that he found a safe space, a community, where he could finally start to confront what he called the ugly sides of himself and begin that really difficult journey of accountability.
Now, this private journey of self-reflection, it didn't just stay private. It actually became a key, though very subtle, part of a masterful, long-term PR strategy to rehabilitate his image.
According to PR experts, his approach follows a clear four-step playbook. And this isn't about splashy apologies or big media stunts. It's about patience, it's about owning your personal struggles with a quiet dignity, knowing when to step back from the spotlight, and ultimately, just letting your work do the talking for you. Instead of fighting fire with fire in the media, he practices restraint. It's this patient strategy that lets public controversy fade over time, and it encourages all of us, the audience, to refocus on his professional work and, eventually, become more forgiving.
So what does all this tell us? What's the takeaway here about modern celebrity, about image management, and about public forgiveness?
It shows that a long-lasting career in today's world, it's not just about talent. It's really a masterclass in managing that gap between our flawed human realities and the polished public myths we create. The performance of accountability can be just as important as the performance on screen.
Which leaves us with a final question. In an age where every single flaw is magnified, what really separates a star who falls from grace from one who endures? Is it talent, a good strategy, public forgiveness, or is it some complex mix of all three? Maybe, in the end, it's really about the stories we tell ourselves and the ones we ultimately choose to believe.